banned from the wedding. I liquidated his entire fortune overnight. My name is Augustus Pendergast, and I am 70 years old. I was sitting on the edge of my worn leather armchair, meticulously polishing my steel-toed work boots, when the phone abruptly rang. It was 8 o'clock on a Thursday evening, the night before the lavish rehearsal dinner for my only daughter's wedding. The comforting smell of shoe polish and old pine filled my small, modest cabin. I picked up the receiver, fully expecting to hear Laya's voice, perhaps nervous about the big day, or maybe checking in on her old man to make sure I had my suit ready. Instead, the voice on the other end was Caden Worth, her fiancé. He did not say hello. He did not ask how I was doing. He cleared his throat with that arrogant, entitled little cough of his, and delivered a sentence that would ultimately cost him exactly $500,000. "Gus, listen to me," Caden said, his voice smooth and cold like polished marble. "We have been reviewing the seating chart for Saturday. Laya and I have made a final decision. We think it is best if you do not sit at the head table. In fact, we think it is best if you do not come to the ceremony at all." I froze, my hand, still holding the coarse brush against the leather of my boot, stopped dead. I asked him why. I asked him if I had unknowingly done something wrong, if I had offended his parents. Caden laughed, a dry, humorless sound that scraped against my eardrums. "It is nothing personal, Gus," he said patronizingly. "It is that this wedding is going to be heavily covered by the society pages. We only want important people in the photos: senators, CEOs, venture capitalists, people who matter. You, with your grease-stained fingernails and that ancient, rusted truck of yours, you do not fit the aesthetic. You would actively ruin the brand we are trying to build." He paused, clearly waiting for me to argue, waiting for me to beg for an invitation to my own daughter's wedding. But I remained silent, the silence stretched across the line and suffocating. Caden took my silence for weak submission. "Good," he said briskly. "I knew you would understand the optics of the situation. You can come to the reception later, through the service entrance if you want to. I told the kitchen staff to set aside a plate for you in the back, near the prep stations. Stay out of sight of the official cameras." Leia cried a little about it, but she firmly agrees. "It is for the best." He hung up, the dial tone hummed in my ear, a flat, endless note. I sat there for a long, agonizing moment, looking at my work boots. My hands were trembling, not from my advanced age, but from a cold, quiet rage that started deep in my gut and rapidly spread to my chest. He said Laya agreed. My little girl. The girl I had raised alone since her mother tragically died of leukemia 20 years ago. The girl I had protected from every storm, every hardship. She agreed that her father was not important enough, not aesthetically pleasing enough, to watch her get married. I did not scream. I did not throw the phone against the wall. I simply stood up and walked to the large oil painting of a lighthouse, hanging above my stone fireplace. I moved it aside, revealing a wall safe. My calloused fingers moved automatically over the dial. Click, click, click. The thick steel door swung open. Inside was not a few dollars or some old family jewelry. Inside was a thick, heavily redacted file, labeled Wedding Contract, and a black leather ledger that contained the deeply buried secrets of the Pendergast Infrastructure Group, the largest, most ruthless underground construction firm on the East Coast. I took out the file. I picked up my secure, encrypted satellite phone, the one I only used for high-level corporate executions and hostile takeovers. I dialed a number I knew by heart. It rang exactly once. "Mr. Kinsley speaking." A voice answered immediately, sharp, alert, and awake. "Kinsley," I said, my voice dangerously steady and low. "Initiate Protocol 19 on the Worth wedding, cancel the venue check, revoke the access to the penthouse, and Kinsley, call Senator Miller and the rest of the VIP list, tell them the wedding is officially off, and invite them to my garage for a beer instead." To fully understand why I did what I did, to understand the sheer magnitude of the destruction I was about to unleash, you have to understand the last 6 months of my life. You have to understand the mask I deliberately wore, and the absolute monster I was unwittingly feeding. Caden Worth thought I was a retired, struggling mechanic living off a meager, fixed-union pension. He saw my 1998 Ford pickup truck with the rusted wheel wells and the dented bumper, and he arrogantly assumed my bank account looked exactly the same. He saw my faded flannel shirts and my calloused, scarred hands, and assumed I was simple, uneducated, and poor. He never bothered to ask how a simple mechanic could effortlessly afford to fix the complex plumbing in his luxury apartment when the landlord repeatedly refused. He never asked where the debt for Laya's out-of-state tuition vanished to. He took and took. For 6 long months, I watched him parade around the city, spending obscene amounts of money that he firmly believed came from a mysterious, benevolent benefactor. You see, when Laya got engaged to Caden, I immediately ran a comprehensive background check through my corporate security team. I knew exactly who Caden was. He was a social climber. He was a mid-level marketing director with a terrifying taste for vintage champagne and a beer budget pocketbook. He wanted a wedding at the Plaza Hotel in New York City. He wanted imported white orchids from South America. He wanted a 7-tier cake meticulously dusted with edible gold leaf. The total cost was projected to be a staggering $500,000. Laya came to me in tears 6 months ago, saying they could not afford it. She knew I had some small savings, but she genuinely thought it was a few $1,000s tucked away in a coffee can for emergencies. I could not tell her the truth. Not yet. I wanted to see if Caden loved her, or if he only loved the lavish lifestyle he thought she could provide through her connections. So, I set up a meticulously crafted test. I instructed my lawyers to create a shell entity called the Pendergast Foundation. I told Laya that I had applied for an exclusive grant on her behalf, a high-end charity that supposedly helps promising young couples start their lives debt-free. It was a complete lie. Of course, I was the sole funder of the foundation. Every check Caden eagerly signed, every non-refundable deposit made to the wedding planner, every down payment for the vintage wines came directly from my personal private equity account. But Caden did not know that. He thought he had charmingly manipulated some board of anonymous directors. He walked around puffing his chest out, constantly bragging to his friends about how his sheer charisma and personal brand attracted wealth. I remember one specific afternoon, 2 months before the wedding. I had driven into the city to meet them for a quick lunch. I parked my old truck in front of the Michelin-starred restaurant. It is a good truck, it has a reliable engine, and it has never let me down. I got out, wiping a bit of oil from my hands onto a rag. Caden was standing on the sidewalk in a bespoke Italian suit that likely cost more than my first house. He looked at my truck, and then he looked at me with a sneer that twisted his handsome face into something ugly. God, Gus, do you seriously have to drive that hideous thing everywhere? Caden asked, his voice intentionally loud enough for the valet and the passing pedestrians to hear. It is an absolute eyesore. It is leaking oil on the pavement. Honestly, it is deeply embarrassing. We are trying to build an image here, Gus. Success attracts success, poverty attracts poverty, and that truck reeks of poverty. I looked at him calmly, suppressing the urge to buy the restaurant and fire him from the reservation list. It gets me from point A to point B, Caden, I said softly. And it is fully paid for, unlike that Aston Martin you are currently leasing at an exorbitant interest rate. Caden rolled his eyes dramatically. That is the fundamental difference between us. Gus, you think about base cost. I think about strategic leverage. I am leasing the lifestyle I inherently deserve. That truck belongs in a junkyard. And frankly, if you cannot dress the part, maybe you should not be meeting us at places like this. People might think we are related. He laughed as if it were a joke, but his eyes were cold. He was testing me, pushing me to see exactly how much disrespect I would silently take. And I took it. I took it, because I looked at Laya standing right next to him. I was waiting for her to say something. I was waiting for my daughter. The brave little girl who used to sit on my lap and proudly steer that truck down our dirt driveway to defend her father. Laya looked at Caden, and then she looked at the ground. She shifted her weight nervously. Daddy, maybe you could park around the corner next time, she mumbled, actively avoiding my gaze. Caden is stressed about the wedding. We have important investor meetings today, and appearances matter. That was the first crack in my heart. She did not defend me. She managed his fragile ego. She actively validated his disrespect. But I told myself it was stress. I told myself she was young, in love, and temporarily blinded by the bright, seductive lights of the city. I forgave her. I kept silently signing the checks. I kept blindly funding the dream, but the insults rapidly continued. Week after week, Caden chipped away at my dignity. He made fun of my grammar in public. Even though I read more complex books in a month than he read in a year, he mocked my small cabin, consistently calling it a shack or a hovel. He treated me like a senile old fool who was lucky to even be allowed in his glowing presence. And through it all, the Pendergast Foundation quietly kept paying. I paid for the hand-stitched Italian silk tablecloths. I paid for the prestigious orchestra that was flown in directly from Vienna. I paid for the custom midnight blue tuxedo Caden was going to wear, the one he falsely claimed was a gift from a personal designer friend. I paid for all of it, and every single time a payment cleared, Caden's ego grew exponentially larger. He started referring to the wedding as the definitive event of the year. He started talking endlessly about the important people who were coming. And that brings us to the devastating conversation that finally broke me. It happened 3 days ago. I had driven to their luxury apartment to drop off a box of old family photos Laya had specifically asked for. I thought maybe they wanted to display them at the reception, pictures of her mother, pictures of us camping, real memories. When I arrived, the mahogany door was slightly ajar. I could hear them arguing heatedly inside. I stopped in the hallway, holding the cardboard box against my chest. "We cannot have those photos displayed," Caden was saying, his voice sharp and disgusted. "Look at them, Laya. Your dad looks like an unemployed hobo in this one. And your mom, look at that dress. It is tragic. It screams working class. We are trying to network here. Laya, we have major venture capitalists coming. We need to project old money, not no money. But they are my parents," Laya said, her voice terribly small and weak. "Mom is gone, Caden. This is how I honor her. You honor her by not embarrassing her daughter." Caden snapped. "And speaking of embarrassing, we need to talk about Gus. He cannot sit at table 1. I have put Senator Miller and his wife there. We desperately need that political connection for my new firm. Gus can sit at table 19 by the kitchen swinging doors." "Table 19? Laya asked, a hint of shock in her voice. "That is for the event staff, Caden. You cannot put my father with the hired photographers and the sound guys." "Why not?" Caden replied callously. "He will be significantly more comfortable there. He can talk about sports, or rusty trucks, or whatever people like him talk about. He will be out of his depth with the senator. He will humiliate us. Laya, do you want him asking the CEO of Tech Corp about carburetor repairs while we are actively trying to close a seed round?" There was a long, agonizing silence. I held my breath in the hallway. This was it. This was the definitive moment. My daughter had to consciously choose. She had to choose between the man who raised her, who silently sacrificed everything for her, and the man who treated her father like a disgusting stain on his designer suit. "You are right," Laya said. Her voice was barely a whisper, but I heard it with crystal clarity. I heard it, and it felt like a physical, crushing blow to the chest. "You are right, Caden. Daddy does not know how to genuinely behave in these circles. He is rough. It would be awkward for everyone. Table 19 is fine. Do not tell him it is the staff table. Tell him it is a quiet spot because of the loud speakers." I did not knock. I did not deliver the precious photos. I turned around and walked silently back to the elevator. I carried the box of photos back to my truck and set it gently on the passenger seat. I drove home in absolute silence. That was the exact moment the checkbook permanently closed. That was the moment the loving, forgiving father died, and the ruthless, calculating businessman woke up. I spent the next 48 hours forensically reviewing every single contract, every receipt, and every hidden clause in the grant agreement I had personally drawn up for the foundation. I realized I had given them far too much power, far too much unearned freedom. I had let them believe they were the untouchable masters of their universe. But gravity is a remarkably harsh teacher, and I was about to cut the string holding them up. When Caden called me tonight to arrogantly tell me I wasn't even welcome at the ceremony, it wasn't a surprise. It was the final, arrogant signature on his own death warrant. He genuinely thought he was banishing a helpless, poor old man. He didn't know he was formally declaring war on the chairman of the board. After I hung up with Kinsley, I poured myself a small glass of cheap bourbon. I sat in my armchair and waited. I knew exactly what was happening on the other side of the city. I knew that right now, Kinsley was making calls. I knew that the global banking system was actively processing the stop payment orders. I knew that the cancellation emails were currently landing in the inboxes of the vendors like mortar shells. The silence in my cabin was, but it wasn't lonely. It was the terrifying silence of an apex hunter waiting patiently for the steel trap to snap shut. I did not stay in the cabin waiting for the morning. There is a deep primal stubbornness in me, a need to verify the structural integrity of a disaster before I officially call in the demolition crew. I walked out to my truck, the 1998 Ford F-150 that Caden hated with such venom, and I turned the key. The engine roared to life, a loud coughing sound that startled the birds in the trees. It was the sound of hard, honest work. It was the sound of undeniable reliability. I drove out of the suburbs, but not toward the Plaza Hotel. I drove toward Queens, toward the gritty industrial district, where the Pendergast Infrastructure Group headquarters occupied an entire city block. It was a brutal fortress of concrete and steel, heavily surrounded by a 10-foot fence topped with razor wire. To the outside world, it looked like a messy construction yard. Inside, it was the highly sophisticated nerve center of a billion-dollar empire. I parked the truck in my reserved spot, right next to the fleet of excavators. I walked to the rear entrance of the corrugated metal building and punched in my code. The door hissed open. Earl, the security guard at the desk, stood up immediately, straightening his tie. "Good evening, Mr. Pendergast," he said, clearly surprised to see me. "We weren't expecting you tonight." "Plans changed, Earl," I said, walking past him without stopping. "Is Kinsley in the war room?" "Yes, sir. He has been there for the last hour, actively waiting for your signal." I walked past the hydraulic lifts and the disassembled transmissions on the main floor to the back office. On the wall hung a large oil painting of the Brooklyn Bridge. I pressed my thumb against a specific, hidden knot in the carved wood of the frame. A soft beep echoed, followed by the mechanical thud of locking bolts retracting. The painting slid silently to the left, revealing a sheet of biometric glass. I leaned forward, letting the red laser scan my retina. The wall itself, a 6-inch slab of reinforced steel, brilliantly disguised as drywall, hissed open. I stepped through the threshold. The air inside was cool, meticulously filtered, and smelled of ozone and static. The lights flickered on automatically, bathing the room in a clinical blue glow. The room was heavily lined from floor to ceiling, with high-definition LED screens humming with data. "I am not a mechanic. My name is Augustus Pendergast, and I am the founder and sole chairman of Pendergast Infrastructure Group. We don't build roads. We own the ground the city firmly stands on. We hold the contracts for the water mains, the fiber optic layout, the emergency tunnel systems. If a toilet flushes in a skyscraper in Manhattan, it flows through a pipe I laid." In the center of the room sat a mahogany table. Kinsley was sitting at the head of it, surrounded by stacks of files and 3 secure laptops. Kinsley was my ruthless lawyer, my primary fixer, and my oldest friend. He was a man who could smile warmly while he foreclosed on your house. He looked up as I entered, slowly removing his reading glasses. He saw the look in my eyes. He didn't ask what happened, he knew. "It is done, then?" Kinsley asked, his voice exceptionally quiet. "It is done," I said, pulling out a chair and sitting down. "They crossed the line, Kinsley. They didn't cross it. They eagerly danced on it. Initiate everything." Kinsley nodded. He tapped a key on his laptop. The blue light from the monitors reflected in his glasses. "Men like Kinsley do not get tired when there is blood in the water." "Phase 1 is already in motion," he said, looking at the screen. "On the screen to your left is the banking interface for the Pendergast Foundation. It shows a pending wire transfer scheduled for 7 in the morning, $500,000. The Plaza Hotel final payment. The contract legally stipulates full settlement 24 hours prior to the event. If the wire does not clear at 7, the contract is voided immediately." I looked at the number on the screen. To Caden Worth, it was a magic number that would buy him entry into the world he desperately craved. To me, it was the base cost of a diesel generator for a tunnel project. It was a rounding error. "Kill it," I said. Kinsley typed a sequence of commands. He entered his authorization code, then waited for mine. I reached forward and typed in the 6-digit PIN that only I knew. The screen flashed amber, then red. The status of the transfer changed from pending to canceled. Reason for cancellation? Kinsley asked, his fingers poised to type the official, legally binding record. Breach of contract, I said, staring at the red text. Violation of the moral turpitude clause. The beneficiary has demonstrated conduct incompatible with the values of the foundation. Specifically, he is a fraud who abuses the working class. Kinsley typed it out word for word. He hit enter. The digital paper trail was complete. At 7:00 in the morning, the accounts receivable department at the plaza would get a terrifying notification that would stop their hearts. The cascading effect would be instantaneous. Now the apartment, I said, leaning back in the leather chair. This was deeply personal. I had purchased the penthouse at 432 Park Avenue through a shell corporation 3 months ago. It was meant to be a surprise. I had planned to hand Laya the keys after the reception. It was a $10 million property with a breathtaking view of the entire city I had helped build. Caden knew about the apartment, but he arrogantly thought he had secured the lease through his own brilliance. He had already moved all his expensive boxes in. Kinsley pulled up the building management system. We owned the building management company too. Current status. Kinsley read, tenant access active. Biometric data for Caden Worth and Laya Pendergast uploaded. Wipe it, I said coldly. Kinsley accessed the security server. I watched as he located Caden's file. He highlighted it. He pressed delete. Access permanently revoked. Kinsley confirmed. The next time Mr. Worth attempts to use his key fob or the retinal scanner in the luxury lobby, the system will instantly flag him as an intruder. Security will be notified to escort him off the premises. What about his personal effects? He has already moved his entire wardrobe in. Have them hastily boxed and put on the curb, I said. Tell the building superintendent to treat it exactly like any other eviction. If he wants his Italian suits, he can pick them up from the dirty sidewalk. And the Aston Martin? Kinsley asked, allowing himself a small, grim smile. I called the dealership, I said. I told them the financing fell through due to a highly suspicious activity alert on the guarantor's account. That would be me. They are sending a tow truck to the hotel parking garage right now. They have a spare key. It will be gone before Caden finishes his dessert at the rehearsal dinner. We sat in the blue glow of the screens for a moment. We had systematically stripped him of his party. We had brutally stripped him of his home. Now it was time to strip him of his audience. The guest list, Kinsley said, pulling up a spreadsheet. 150 guests, top tier. You have Senator Miller. You have Arthur Galloway, the CEO of Metrobank. You have the deputy mayor. Caden had spent months meticulously curating this list. He had bragged about it endlessly. He didn't know that 80% of the powerful names on that list were men and women I had done business with for 30 years. He thought they were coming for his marketing charisma. They were coming because they were curious about the Pendergast Foundation. They were coming to politely kiss the ring. They didn't know exactly who was wearing it. Give me the phone, I said. Kinsley slid the satellite phone across the mahogany table. It was 2:15 in the morning. These men would be fast asleep. But when Gus Pendergast calls at 2:00 a.m., you answer. You answer because it usually means a tunnel has collapsed or a billion-dollar union deal has fallen through. You answer because money never sleeps. I dialed Senator Miller first. It rang exactly 3 times. This is Miller, a groggy voice answered. This better be an emergency. It is Gus, I said. The tone changed instantly. The grogginess vanished, rapidly replaced by the sharp alertness of a veteran politician. Gus, is everything all right? Did the inspection on the bridge fail? The bridge is fine, John, I said. I am calling about the heavily publicized wedding tomorrow. The one at the plaza. Oh, right. The senator heavily sighed. The Worth kid, to be brutally honest. Gus, I was dreading it. I don't know the arrogant groom from Adam, but my chief of staff explicitly said the Pendergast Foundation was heavily involved, so I had to show face. I was planning to stay for the cocktail hour and quietly slip out the back. You don't have to go, I said. The wedding is officially off? Why? Because the groom is a fraud, I said, my voice flat. And because the Pendergast Foundation has definitively decided to pull its funding. There was a pause on the line, then a low, knowing chuckle. You are the foundation, aren't you, Gus? I always heavily suspected. You love playing these shadowy games. I am the foundation, I confirmed, and I am the father of the bride. The silence was much longer this time, deeply respectful. Oh, I see, I am sorry, Gus. That is, it had to be done. But listen, John, I have an amount of brisket marinating. I have a huge keg of the good stuff imported from Germany. Since your schedule miraculously cleared up, why don't you come out to the house tomorrow? Not the penthouse, the garage in Queens, the garage? The senator asked. You mean the lot with all the excavators? The same. Done, the senator said without a single moment of hesitation. I will bring the expensive scotch and Gus. If that arrogant kid gives you any trouble, explicitly call me. I can easily have his parking tickets audited going back to kindergarten. I hung up. One downed old Arthur Galloway. Next, the ruthless bank president answered on the first ring. Gus, tell me the entire market didn't crash. The market is fine, Arthur, I said. But Cadenworth's credit rating is about to take a unrecoverable dive. Who? The groom, the wedding tomorrow. Oh, that, Galloway groaned heavily. My wife bought a new, expensive dress for that. She thinks this mysterious silent angel character is going to be there. She wants to pitch her charity. Tell her the silent angel is going to be in his dirty garage in Queens drinking cheap beer, I said. And tell her if she wants that donation, she should definitely come wear jeans. You are kidding, Galloway said, stunned. You are the backer? I was until tonight. He forgot who pours the concrete. Arthur, he thought he could live in the penthouse without actively respecting the foundation. Galloway laughed a deep, booming belly laugh. I love it. We will be there, noon. I said. I went down the list. I called the deputy mayor. I called the union leaders. I called the heavyweight investors. I made 12 calls in total. Every single one of them answered. Every single one of them listened. And every single one of them eagerly agreed to come to the dirty garage. Not one of them asked about Caden. Not one of them asked about his marketing genius or his brand vision. To them, he was a line item, a venue, a reason to put on a tuxedo. When the venue changed, they instantly changed with it. They were loyal to the true power, not the party. And I was the power. I put the phone down. I looked at Kinsley. You realize what you systematically did, Kinsley said softly. You didn't cancel a wedding, Gus. You erased him socially. You took away his credibility. When word gets out that the senator and Galloway eagerly skipped his wedding to hang out with his mechanic father-in-law, he will be an absolute laughingstock. He won't be able to get a job waiting tables in this town. I know, I said. And Laya? Kinsley asked gently. This is going to hurt her, Gus. It is going to humiliate her. I stood up and looked at the live feed of the city. She needs to be hurt, I said, my voice barely a whisper. She needs to feel the absolute burn, because pain is the only teacher that doesn't let you cheat on the test. She needs to see Caden for what he truly is when the bright lights go out. It was 3 a.m. The war room was quiet again. The destruction was set in motion. The missiles were in the air. There was nothing left to do but wait for impact. I drove back to my cabin in the early morning light. The sun was coming up, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and angry orange. I pulled into my driveway and parked the truck. I heavily set up the grill on the front porch. I filled a cooler with beer. I sat down in my rocking chair and patiently waited. At 7:30 a.m., my phone frantically rang. It was Laya. Let it go to voicemail at 7:45 a.m. Kinsley immediately texted me. The hotel tried to run the card. Decline code sent. The furious manager is on his way to the bridal suite. I smiled. I could almost hear the scream from here at 8 a.m. My phone rang a third time. I finally answered it. Dad. Thank God, Laya sobbed hysterically. Her voice was high and tight, shrill with sheer panic. Dad, something is terribly wrong. There has been a mistake. A terrible mistake. The manager says the check bounced. He says the foundation canceled the grant. We have to pay $500,000 immediately, or they are kicking us out. I leaned back in my rocking chair. That sounds like a serious problem, Laya, I said calmly. But I am not sure what you want me to do about it. I am an unimportant person. I am not even a guest at the ceremony, remember? No, Dad, please don't be like that, she cried. Caden is screaming at everyone. We need you to do something. You have your retirement savings, right? You have the house. Can you take out a loan for today? We will definitely pay you back. I promise. The foundation must have made a clerical error. I closed my eyes. Even now, even in the face of disaster, she wasn't asking for her loving father. She was asking for a wallet. She wanted me to severely mortgage my home, my safety, to save her vanity project. She wanted me to go into debt for a wedding I was explicitly banned from attending. Laya, I said, my voice dropping a terrifying octave. There is no clerical error. The Foundation did not playfully make a mistake. The Foundation has extremely strict bylaws regarding the conduct of its beneficiaries. It reserves the right to withdraw funding if the recipients display a lack of moral character. Dad, what are you talking about? How would you know the complex bylaws? Because I am the Foundation, Laya. Silence, absolute, stunned silence. I am the donor, I continued. I am the one who paid for the orchids. I am the one who paid for the vintage champagne. It was me, Leia, all of it. I own Pendergast infrastructure. I vigorously built the bridges Caden drives over. You told me I didn't fit the aesthetic. You agreed that I should eat in the dirty kitchen. Well, Leia, I am staying in my kitchen, and I am actively taking my checkbook with me. But Dad, the wedding, the guests. Senator Miller is currently coming to my house for a barbecue, I said. They are my friends, Laya. They are coming to hang out with the mechanic. I hung up the phone. I grabbed my keys. I had extremely important guests coming, and I needed to ensure the beer was ice cold. Caden Worth wasn't going to go down quietly. He was going to try to take what he thought was his, and he had no idea that I was waiting for him. The sun rose over Central Park, casting a golden glow on the window panes of the Plaza Hotel. But inside the luxury bridal suite, the atmosphere was anything but warm. It was 7 in the morning, and the air heavily smelled of hairspray, nervous sweat, and expensive coffee. Caden Worth sat in a high-backed velvet chair, staring into a lighted mirror, as if he were preparing for a royal coronation rather than a wedding. He was not wearing his shirt yet, a silk robe that he had adamantly insisted on buying for the getting ready photos. A young makeup artist named Sarah was hovering near his face, nervously trying to apply a touch of concealer under his eyes. Her hands were visibly shaking. Stop! Caden barked, pulling his head back sharply. You are doing it wrong. Look at me. Do I look like a corpse to you? You are making me look gray. I need to look luminous, Sarah. Luminous. This is going to be in vogue. Do you understand what that means? It means if I look tired, you never work in this town again. I am sorry, Mr. Worth, Sarah stammered, frantically stepping back. I was trying to blend. I do not pay you to actively try. Caden snapped, cutting her off. I pay you to be perfect. The silent angel paid a fortune for this team. And frankly, I am unimpressed. Get out of my sight before you ruin my pores with your sheer incompetence. Sarah fought back bitter tears as she packed her kit and hastily hurried out of the room. Caden didn't even watch her go. He turned to the mirror again, running a hand over his jaw. He looked at his reflection with a terrifying hunger. He wasn't looking at a man in love. He was looking at a brand. Laya was sitting on the sofa in the corner, clutching a mimosa she hadn't even touched. She looked pale. She was watching Caden abuse the staff, and she said nothing. Caden, baby, maybe you should relax a little, Laya whispered nervously. The photographers will be here in an hour. I cannot relax, Laya. Caden said, standing up and pacing the room. Everything has to be perfect. The senator is coming. The CEO of Tech Corp is coming. This isn't a wedding. It is a launch party. It is my debut. And your mechanic father better not screw it up by showing his greasy face at the wrong door. As if directly summoned by his arrogance, there was a knock at the door. It wasn't the polite, rhythmic knock of room service. It was an authoritative thud. Finally, Caden muttered, adjusting his robe. Come in. The door opened. It wasn't a waiter with a silver tray. It was Mr. Sterling, the general manager of the plaza. He was a man who had seen everything from royalty to rock stars, and he usually wore a mask of professional indifference. But this morning his face was pale. His lips were pressed into a thin white line. He wasn't alone. Behind him stood 2 men in dark suits. They weren't hotel security. They looked like aggressive private contractors. Mr. Sterling, Caden said, arrogantly spreading his arms. You are late. I hope you are here to tell me the ballroom is ready for my inspection. I have a tight schedule. Mr. Sterling didn't smile. He walked into the room and heavily closed the door, leaving the 2 security guards standing guard in the hallway. He held a clipboard in his hand. and his knuckles were white as he gripped it. "Mr. Worth," Mr. Sterling said, his voice tight. "We need to deeply speak immediately." "We are speaking," Caden said arrogantly. "What is the problem?" "Is it the flowers? If the orchids aren't white enough, replace them." "I don't care about the cost. The foundation covers it. There are no flowers, Mr. Worth," Mr. Sterling said firmly. Caden laughed, a short, nervous sound. "What do you mean there are no flowers?" "I mean the florists have been ordered to cease operations, Mr. Sterling said. "They are actively packing up the trucks as we speak. The grand ballroom is being locked. The kitchen staff has been dismissed." Caden stared at him. The sheer arrogance on his face faltered, rapidly replaced by a terrifying flicker of confusion. "Is this a joke?" Caden asked. "Because if this is a joke, it is not funny. I will angrily call the donor right now. I will have your job." Mr. Sterling stepped much closer, his voice dropping to a harsh, unforgiving whisper. "There is no need to call anyone. We received an aggressive notification from our finance department 10 minutes ago. The wire transfer for the final balance of $500. It was heavily flagged. Caden repeated the word, feeling foreign in his mouth. "Cancelled," Mr. Sterling corrected him. "The issuing bank sent a stop payment order. The Pendergast Foundation has revoked the grant. The funds have been frozen." Laya let out a small, terrified gasp from the sofa. She stood up, her hands visibly trembling. "Revoked?" She whispered. "That is impossible. It gets worse," Mr. Sterling continued, ignoring her and keeping his eyes fixed on Caden. "When the wire failed, we attempted to run the credit card on file for the security deposit. Your personal American Express, Mr. Worth." Caden puffed out his chest. "That card has a $50,000 limit. Run it again." "We did run it," Mr. Sterling said. 3 times it was declined. Code red. That means the card hasn't hit its limit. It means the issuer has flagged the account for fraudulent activity and sheer insolvency. The account has been closed, Mr. Worth. The room went silent. Caden looked at the manager, then at Laya, then at his own terrified reflection in the mirror. The man in the mirror suddenly looked small. "This is a mistake," Caden shouted, his voice cracking. "Do you know exactly who I am?" "I am Caden Worth. I have major investors. I have a silent angel. This is a glitch, a banking error. You fix this. You fix this right now, or I will sue this hotel into the ground." Mr. Sterling did not flinch. "There is no error, sir. We deeply spoke directly to the Foundation's ruthless legal representative. He explicitly cited a violation of the Morals Clause. He said, and I quote, 'The beneficiary has been deemed unworthy of the investment due to gross, aggressive mistreatment of staff and family.'" "Mistreatment," Caden sputtered. "I am a perfectionist." "That is not a crime. It is when you are spending someone else's money, Mr. Sterling said coldly. "Now, here is the harsh reality of your situation. You have a balance of 0. You have vendors who are demanding payment for work already done. And you are currently illegally occupying the most expensive suite in New York City, without a valid method of payment. You have exactly 30 minutes to vacate the premises. If you are not out of this room, I will have those gentlemen in the hallway escort you out, and they will not be gentle." Mr. Sterling turned on his heel and walked to the door. "Oh, and one more thing," he added, looking back. "The valet informed me that an aggressive tow truck arrived for the Aston Martin. Apparently, the lease was also heavily guaranteed by the Foundation. It is gone, Mr. Worth." He opened the door and heavily left. Caden stood in the center of the room, trembling. He looked at Laya as if he expected her to magically pull a checkbook out of her dress. "Call him," Caden whispered frantically. "Call your dirty mechanic father. He has savings, doesn't he? Get him on the phone. Tell him we need a loan. Tell him I will pay him back double next month. Fix this, Laya." Laya looked at the shattered vase of white roses Caden had hurled against the wall. She reached for her phone, dialed the number, and prayed he would answer. She prayed the mechanic could save the prince. But deep down, as she heavily listened to the ringing, she knew. The loving mechanic was gone, and all that was left was the bill. The hallway leading to the grand ballroom at the plaza is usually a corridor of anticipation. But for Caden Worth, it had become a tunnel of horrors. He sprinted down the hallway, his unbuttoned silk robe flapping behind him. He burst through the double doors and stopped dead in his tracks. The scene before him was not a lavish wedding preparation. It was an aggressive autopsy. The ballroom was a hive of activity, but they were viciously tearing it down. A team of florists was moving with military precision, dismantling the floral arch that had cost $40. Silsozen. They were pulling the rare white orchids out by the handful, tossing them into large, gray plastic bins like common dirty weeds. The sound of stems snapping echoed in the cavernous room, a dry, brittle noise that sounded like breaking bones. "Stop!" Caden screamed, running toward the stage. "What are you doing?" "Those are my flowers. Do not touch them." The head florist pulled her arm away. "They are not your flowers, Mr. Worth." The Pendergast Foundation flagged the account. "They told us to recover the inventory immediately to mitigate loss." Caden spun around. He saw the catering team clearing the tables. The silver chargers were being stacked. "Wait," Caden yelled, "Chef Henri. Where is the food? Where is the expensive Wagyu beef?" Chef Henri emerged, wearing a simple windbreaker. "The kitchen is closed, Monsieur Worth." The foundation heavily left specific instructions. Since they explicitly paid the deposit, they firmly retain ownership of the product. A refrigerated truck is arriving in 10 minutes. The food is being generously donated to a dirty soup kitchen in the Bronx. "Good day, sir." Caden stood there in the middle of the dismantling ballroom. He pulled out his phone. He dialed the number for the Pendergast Foundation. It was answered by a man with a deep, cold voice. "This is Caden Worth." Caden shouted, "I demand to speak to the chairman. I demand an explanation. This is Mr. Kinsley, legal counsel for the foundation," the voice said calmly. "The chairman is unavailable. He is actively preparing for a private event. My wedding is the event." Caden screamed, "You people are ruining me. You canceled the checks. You stole my car." "Why? The foundation has a strict set of aggressive bylaws," Kinsley said, his voice cutting through Caden's rant. Section 4. Paragraph 2 states that funding may be revoked immediately if the beneficiary displays moral turpitude. It means the chairman has observed your abusive behavior over the last 6 months and found it lacking. He watched you belittle service staff. He watched you insult your family. The grant is terminated. "He watched me," Caden whispered, paranoid. "Who?" "The foundation also holds the master lease on your penthouse," Kinsley continued. "As of this morning, you are in violation of the aggressive occupancy agreement. I suggest you find somewhere else to sleep tonight." The line went dead. Caden dropped his phone. He had to vigorously find a way to pay the plaza before the guests arrived. He desperately thought of his wealthy parents. He sprinted through the lobby of the plaza, nearly colliding with a bellhop cart. Standing next to the cart, looking confused, were his parents, Preston and Victoria Worth. They were dressed for a wedding that was no longer happening. "Dad," Caden gasped, grabbing Preston's lapels. "Mom, you have to help me. The wire didn't go through. I need $500,000 right now. Write it from the trust. Liquidate the investment account." Preston Worth looked at his frantic son. He pulled Caden's hands off his jacket. He looked at his wife, and for the first time, Caden saw defeat in his father's eyes. "We cannot help you, son," Preston said, his voice quiet and trembling. "What do you mean?" Caden screamed. "You are the Worths. You vigorously have assets. Liquidate something. Sell the boat. Sell the summer house." "There is no boat, Caden," Victoria whispered, clutching her handbag. "We sold the boat 2 years ago, and the summer house," Preston added, "is in foreclosure. The ruthless bank took possession last month." Caden stood there, feeling as if the marble floor had turned to quicksand. "What are you talking about?" "You are rich. We were rich," Preston corrected him. "A long time ago, we thought this wedding would fix things. We thought if we could get in a room with the senator and the investors, Preston could pitch a new venture. We spent our absolute last $10,000 on these clothes and this hotel room. We have nothing left." Caden looked at the parents he had idolized. They weren't titans of industry. They were frauds. They were exactly like him, living on credit and fumes. The Worth legacy was in hollow, shell-painted gold. "You are telling me," Caden hissed, "that you are broke? We tried to keep it up for you," Victoria wept. "You didn't do it for me," Caden spat. "You are pathetic." Leia stood at the top of the grand staircase, watching the scene unfold. She heard everything. She heard her fiancé beg. She heard his parents confess to being frauds. She stood there in her white dress, a princess in a castle that was being repossessed. She had traded her loving, hard-working father for this. She had traded the man who worked 18 hours a day to pay for her braces for a ruthless family of con artists who viewed her wedding as a networking event. She dialed her father's number again. It went to voicemail. "Daddy," she sobbed into the phone. "I am sorry, you were right. They are monsters, they are broke. It was all a lie." But the line remained dead. He wasn't coming. The loving mechanic had closed his shop, and all that was left was the silence. It was 11 o'clock in the morning, and the sidewalk in front of the Plaza Hotel had become a theater of the absurd. The sun was beating down on the pavement, baking the city. Tourists were swarming around the fountain, oblivious to the tragedy unfolding near the luggage carts. Caden Worth stood there like a captain, who refused to leave the burning ship. He had convinced himself that if he could intercept the senator or the investors before they walked into the lobby, he could spin a story. He could tell them there was a security threat. He could tell them anything, as long as it kept them from finding out that he was penniless. He looked terrible. His midnight blue tuxedo was wrinkled and stained with sweat. He was pacing back and forth in front of the revolving doors, ignoring the doormen who were watching him with open hostility. His parents were heavily sitting on a bench nearby, clutching their bags, looking like two statues of despair. And then it happened. The traffic on Fifth Avenue parted like the Red Sea. A hush fell over the crowd of tourists. Turning the corner onto the hotel drive was a convoy of vehicles that screamed power. 3 blacked-out Cadillac Escalades led the way, followed by a silver Bentley and a vintage Rolls-Royce Phantom. Caden stopped pacing. He stared at the cars, his eyes widening. "They came," he whispered. "They came." He straightened his spine and ran forward, pushing a bellhop out of the way. He approached the lead SUV, his arms spread wide. "Senator!" Caden shouted, his voice cracking with relief. "Mr. Galloway, welcome to the main event." The doors of the Escalades thudded open. Arthur Galloway, the CEO of Metrobank, emerged from the silver Bentley. He stepped onto the curb. "Arthur!" Caden yelled, stepping into Galloway's path. "I am glad you made it. We have had a change of plans regarding the venue." Galloway didn't stop. He didn't break stride. He simply shifted his weight, maneuvering around Caden with the effortless grace of a man who has spent 40 years navigating shark-infested boardrooms. He treated Caden Worth exactly as one would treat a traffic cone, an inanimate obstacle to be bypassed. Behind Galloway, Senator Miller emerged from the vintage Rolls-Royce, heavily holding a cigar. "Senator," Caden pleaded, reaching out to touch the senator's sleeve. "Please, the foundation sent you." "I am the beneficiary." Senator Miller stopped for a fraction of a second. He looked down at Caden. He didn't speak to Caden. He spoke to the air above Caden's head. "Move," the senator said. It wasn't an aggressive shout. It was a command, low and rumbling like intense thunder. Caden flinched, stepping back as if he had been burned. The senator walked past him, joining Galloway, and together the 2 most powerful men in New York walked away from the golden doors of the plaza. They walked toward the rusted green truck that was leaking oil onto the pristine driveway. I stood there, leaning against the fender of my rusted Ford. I had crossed my arms over my chest, the fabric of my bespoke Italian suit stretching comfortably across my shoulders. I watched them come. Arthur Galloway reached me first. He looked at the bespoke suit, the way the trousers broke perfectly over my polished Oxfords. Then he looked at the truck. He laughed, a genuine sound of intense delight. "Gus," Galloway said, extending his hand, "you are in study in contrasts, my friend." "It suits you." "It isn't wedding day, Arthur," I said, shaking his hand. "A father has to look the part, even if he isn't invited." Senator Miller stepped up next, clapping a hand on my shoulder. "Mr. Pendergast," the senator said, his voice booming, "I have to passionately thank you. Canceling this gaudy affair was the greatest act of public service since I voted for the infrastructure bill." "I am glad I could be of service, John," I smiled. "And besides, we have business to discuss," the senator said. The committee moved the vote on the Hudson expansion. $2 billion in bridge and tunnel contracts, Gus. And I want Pendergast Infrastructure to lead the bid. We can go over the zoning maps in your dirty garage. $2 billion. The words hung in the humid air. 10 yards away, Caden Worth stood frozen. He heard The wind carried the senator's voice straight to him. $2 billion. 4,000 times the cost of the wedding he couldn't pay for. Caden's face was a mask of slack-jawed horror. His small brain was trying to process the situation. The mechanic, the old man who fixed trucks. This man was discussing $2 billion government contracts with a United States senator while leaning against a heap of intense scrap metal. Caden took a stumbling step forward. "No," Caden whispered. "No, that is impossible. He is heavily nobody." "He is the help. Senator, you are making a mistake." Galloway turned slowly. He looked at Caden with the intense, cold, analytical eyes of a banker assessing an aggressive bad loan. "Young man," Galloway said, his intense voice cutting like a razor. "Do you know who heavily built the foundation of the building you are currently standing in front of? Do you know who laid the fiber optic cables? Augustus Pendergast built this city. He is the chairman of the board, and you. You are a noise complaint waiting to happen." Caden reeled back, clutching his chest as if he were having a heart attack. The reality was too big. It crushed his small, fragile ego into dust. I looked past Caden toward the hotel entrance. Laia was standing at the top of the stairs. She was still wearing her white dress, but it looked gray in the light of day. She looked at me. Our eyes met. For 28 years, she had looked at me with intense pity. Then, with aggressive shame, she had looked at my hands and seen dirty failure. But now, for the first time, she saw me. She saw the suit. She saw the senator deferring to me. She realized in that moment that the truck wasn't a sign of poverty. It was a choice. She looked at Caden. She saw him for what he was, a small, frightened boy in a rented suit, screaming at the sky. And then she looked back at me. Her mouth formed the word "Dad." It was a silent plea. She wanted me to fix it. She wanted me to wave my hand and make the nightmare stop. But I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I looked at her with the same intense, calm detachment I used when I inspected a cracked concrete foundation. I had loved her enough to let her go, and now I loved her enough to let her fall. She needed to hit the bottom. She needed to feel the impact. Only then could she rebuild. I turned my back on her. I turned back to the men who respected me. "John Arthur," I said, gesturing to the open cab of the truck. "The cooler is in the back. The brisket is on the smoker. Let's get out of here." Senator Miller laughed and climbed into the passenger seat, heavily shouting, "Shotgun!" Galloway climbed into the back. I walked around to the aggressive driver's side. Before I got in, Caden heavily lunged. He ran toward me, grabbing the door handle, his eyes wild. "Gus, wait," Caden screamed. "We can talk. I can explain the silent angel thing. It was a marketing strategy. I was protecting your privacy. I did it for you. $2 billion, Gus. Think of what my agency could do with that account. I can rebrand you." I looked at his hand on my door. "Remove your hand, Caden," I said softly, "or I will remove it for you." He let go instantly. Backing away. "You are fired, Caden," I said. "Fired?" Caden blinked. "I don't work for you." "I have my own agency. I bought your agency this morning," I said. "It was a subsidiary of a holding company I acquired last week. Your agency is being dissolved today. Your aggressive non-compete clause is effective immediately. You are heavily unemployed, Caden, and you owe the plaza $50 on dollars in cancellation fees." I climbed into the truck and slammed the door. The sound was final, like a coffin lid closing. I turned the key. The engine roared, a beautiful, ugly sound that drowned out his intense screams. I shifted into gear and pulled away, leaving Caden Worth standing in the toxic exhaust fumes, leaving my daughter crying on the steps. I had a barbecue to get to, and for the first time in 6 months, I was hungry. The brisket was smoking on the large grill, and the smell of hickory heavily filled the air around my dirty garage. Senator Miller was sitting on a stack of dirty tires, holding a cold, cheap beer. The atmosphere was light. I was flipping the meat when I heard the crunch of gravel. I didn't have to look up to know who it was. The aggressive vultures always circle back to the carcass. A dirty yellow taxi had pulled up to the chain-link gate. It looked small and sad against the backdrop of my machinery. The back door opened, and Laia stepped out. Her wedding dress was gray with street dust, and the bodice was stained with tears. Caden climbed out the other side. He looked like a man who had been mugged by aggressive reality. They walked toward the gate, but they didn't open it. They stood there, gripping the wire mesh like prisoners looking out at intense freedom. I walked over to them. I didn't open the gate. I stood on my side, on the property I owned. On the concrete I poured, and I looked at them. I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt a deep, hollow fatigue. "Daddy," Leia whispered, her voice cracking. "Please let us in. We have nowhere to go. Caden's parents left. We don't have our apartment. Please, Daddy, I am your daughter." I looked at her. I saw the woman who had sat in intense silence while her fiancé called me trash. "I cannot let you in, Leia," I said, my intense voice softly unyielding. "This is a private event for important people only. And I am afraid you do not make the list, Dad." "Stop," Caden pleaded, pushing up against the fence. "I get it. You made your point. You are powerful. You win now. Open the gate. We need to figure out our next move. I need to fix this agency mess." "We are partners, Gus." I reached into the pocket of my jeans. I pulled out a folded piece of aggressive paper. It wasn't a check. It was an invoice printed on the letterhead of the Plaza Hotel. I unfolded it and slid it through the diamond-shaped gap in the intense fence. "I am not your partner, Caden," I said, "and we are not family." Caden took the paper. His hands were shaking so he almost dropped it. He stared at the numbers. $50,000. He choked out. "What is this?" "Cancellation fees," I said. "The contract stipulates that any fees heavily incurred from a same-day cancellation due to aggressive breach of conduct are the sole responsibility of the signing party. That is you, Caden. You signed the venue agreement. You owe the Plaza $50,000, and I suggest you pay it." Caden crumpled the paper, his face turning intense purple. "I don't have $50,000. You took everything." "I took back what was mine," I corrected him. Leia dropped to her knees in the aggressive dirt. The white dress billowed around her. She grabbed the chain-link fence. "Daddy, please." She sobbed, her shoulders shaking. "I am sorry. I was stupid. I wanted to fit in." He told me this was how the world worked. "Daddy, help me. Pay the bill." "I will work for you. Make it stop." I crouched down so I was eye level with her through the fence. "Leia," I said gently, "you wanted to be an important person. You told me that yourself." She nodded blindly, tears streaming down her aggressive face. "Well, Peanut," I said, using her childhood nickname for the absolute last time. "Being an important person isn't about the champagne. It is about carrying the weight. It is about cleaning up your own messes. Important people take aggressive responsibility. They don't call their daddy when the aggressive bill comes." "But I can't," she whispered. "I can't do it alone." "Then you better learn fast," I said, standing up. "Because you are alone, Leia. You married a fraud, and you alienated your father. You are standing in the intense dirt, in a ruined dress, with a debt you cannot pay. That is your reality, own it." I turned away from the fence. "Daddy, wait!" Leia screamed. I walked back toward the grill, the intense sound of her crying fading behind me. I didn't look back. I picked up my tongs. I flipped the meat. The senator raised his beer in a toast. I raised mine back. The sun was high and hot. The intense air smelled of smoke and aggressive freedom. I had lost a daughter, but I had regained my dignity. And as I took an aggressive drink of the cold beer, I knew that for the first time in a long time, I was exactly where I belonged.